Washington is making moves in Dhaka and it's making many uncomfortable. A recent Washington Post report has triggered intense debate across Bangladesh and the region, suggesting that the United States wants a greater say in Bangladesh's political future. Now, what has unsettled most observers and analysts is a verified audio recording of a closed door meeting between female Bangladeshi journalists and an unnamed US diplomat, where the diplomat is heard saying that we want them to be our friends. Them here referring to Jamaat Islami. The audio was first procured and investigated by Bangladeshi journalist Zulkarnain Saer Khan, who deemed it as of critical importance to public interest. Since then, he has been praised for exposing backroom diplomacy and has also been criticized by former US diplomats who question his interpretation. Hello and welcome to The Print. I am Devdatta and we are in conversation with Zulkarnain himself as we unpack what the audio really means, why the US is reaching out to Jamaat, and whether Bangladesh's political reality is fundamentally shifting. Welcome to The Print, Zulkarnain.
Thank you so much, Steph. Thank you for inviting me here.
Starting with the audio itself, I wanted to ask you to begin with that why did you consider this recording as such a significant one, and what convinced you that it was authentic and newsworthy?
So, if like the context here is basically the audio recording which I obtained from a reliable source, and I must tell you that this is not the only piece of audio recording that I have heard. There are multiple audio recordings that I have gone through, and there are people with whom various US diplomats met, specifically the diplomat in question here. He met many individuals, including questionable political party leaders, questionable in a way that political parties or organizations who are not really mainstream and they're not regarded well by the regular political parties. I do not want to name them. I do not wish to name them, of course. And his movements across Bangladesh since the 5th of August 2024, that was after the former Prime Minister Hasina left the country, flee away from the country in the face of a massive uprising. So we have noticed a pattern in his movement that suggests that he's moving with an agenda, and he did play a vital role in the Rohingya corridor, the much talked about Rohingya corridor. And he was one of the key person who wanted that to happen, that humanitarian corridor, which was in discussion a few months earlier. And Bangladesh's main opposition party or main political party, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, including Bangladesh Army and other security forces, they were very much against that because we were considering that the security and stability of that region might become more vulnerable if such a corridor is operational. Also, the priority of the interim government was mandated to be restoration of our democratic process and conducting an election, not taking decisions on certain geostrategical and matters which concerns our security aspect. So when I matched all those things and his role in meeting certain underground party leaders, even funding at some extent to certain people, and when I came across fragments of audio recordings that he has been talking to people, I of course interviewed some people, and I took their view. They were very much concerned that why would a US diplomat again and again come up with such a statement that they want to see a certain political party in the power. Until I received that recording, I did not had anything that significant that I can firmly say that he on the record said it. Although they deny that it was they kind of try to play it that it was an off the record conversation. But My point is, you were inviting a group of female journalists who are seen or who are considered as feminists, feminist voices, and you have invited them to your embassy inside, and you have met them, and you have shared your such opinion with all of them together. So if you had to do something like this, something so sensitive, why we did not invite them somewhere else if it was not an official conversation, right?
Right.
So even these people that you invited them, you were telling them, you're trying to give them confidence or you're trying to give them comfort that if a certain political party comes into power, they're not going to impose Sharia. If they impose Sharia, then what actions you're going to do? So are you
We'll impose
trying
tariffs
to
on.
console them that, hey, look, this is what is going to happen? They might come into power. We would like to be friends with them. Even if they comes, they will not impose Sharia. So you're kind of assuring them of something that you can only do if you have that much confidence on the other part, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
it's not your job. You are a diplomat. You are there to develop the relationship with the people of Bangladesh and increase trade, sign bilateral treaties, and of course, like exchange programs, etc. As such. But instead, you're trying to get involved in the local politics of the country. That is not your mandate, and we have seen that in the past. That how the Indian authorities were involved in certain Bangladeshi uh, mainstream policy making level in the political atmosphere, and we do not want a repetition of uh, something like that. Like we have already experienced it. We have seen how the Indian hegemony or the Indian present government's influence over Bangladeshi politics destroyed the democracy of Bangladesh. We do not want to see the same kind of uh, the same kind of approach or influence by another powerful country. Let let us decide. Let our people decide for ourselves. That is my approach. That is how I see it. And so when I received this audio, I checked with the people who were present there, and most of them confirmed me that this has actually happened. He indeed said these words. And he mentioned some other words there that if another party comes into power, they will destroy themselves by doing corruption. And he also said that the ICT is a code that the US doesn't recognize. So, what do you actually mean by all these things? Like it needed some kind of explanation. And I felt it is of serious, significant public importance, and it had to be reported. And so I made the call. Also, before I shared this, while I was sharing this with the Washington Post, I also reached out to this individual, like this specific guy, the diplomat in question, that I have received this audio and I would like to confirm that it is in fact you. And he responded to me that you can confirm with the media office of our embassy in Dhaka. So the next day, the media office of the embassy of US embassy in Dhaka reached out to me, and they wanted to have a discussion with me, which of course I had. And during the course of that discussion, it was understood that the audio is indeed genuine and the conversation did take place. So once I was
So at no
convinced that,
point did they, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to know that at no point did they say that no, you cannot, since you are verifying the audio, you cannot use it or we don't agree to it. They never, kind of countered you when you said that.
yeah, they did. They said that I should not be doing it. It is a breach of trust. But, like, I, of course, cannot disclose from where I received it or who shared it. But for me, when I receive it, to me, it is a leaked material, right? So someone recorded it and shared it with me. And here I am not bound by any kind of ethical point that I cannot share because I was not physically present in that meeting. I am here in the UK, and that meeting took place in the US Embassy in Bangladesh. I was not even present there. I do not. of course, I cannot share who even shared it with me. So uh, I don't really see that it is a problem. If I was there in my personal capacity and I committed that I will not record anything or anything as such, then of course I would not have shared it. Of course, I would not do it. But here, the matter is something else. I have received it from a source and I verified it, and the material seems to be absolutely authentic. Even during my conversation with the U.S. Officials in from their embassy, it was very much clear that it is in fact their colleague who said such things. And then I passed it on to the Washington Post, and Washington Post ran the story.
And I before I come back to the political side of it, one question that I have following up on what you said, you spoke about an Indian hegemony over Bangladeshi politics. If you could elaborate a bit on that, and now with the with the US reaching out to Jamaat and so much happening, and Bangladesh about to go to elections within 15 the next 15 to 16 days, do you see some kind of a a similar behavior when it comes to the US, and if you could elaborate a bit on that as well?
So, as you are aware, that previous, the previous political party who ruled Bangladesh for nearly 16 years, and since 2008, end of 2008, there were three elections actually. Um, One was in 2014 after they were selected, the first election. Another one is in 2018, and the last one was in 2024. None of these elections were credible. None of these elections were accepted by the other political parties. Most of our development partners, including the US and European Unions, vetoed against the last election and the previous election. They had certain observation of about the 2018 election. So, but the only country that supported those elections, who approved of the Army League, despite their terrible human rights record, the way they handled the freedom of the press, the way they suppressed the dissent, and the way they wanted to uh, like manipulate anyone or eliminate anyone who would become a critical voice against them. India, being such a large democratic country, such a large democracy, never raised a concern about how Sheikh Hasina and the Army League was doing their business in Bangladesh. It was their responsibility to correct them. If if they were a true friend, they would have definitely done that. But we have seen the opposite. Indian embassy people, Indian embassy officials, Indian diplomats, they were rather running around and vouching for the Army League for people. When the Bangladeshi people were denying that we are not accepting this, the other political parties were denying that it was a total sham election, it was a total staged election. We do not accept it. The Indian diplomats, on the other hand, they are like, it is Bangladesh's own affairs, and we are happy with it. Some even went and said that our relationship with Hasina is great. Like, we are in very friendly terms, like husband and wife. These kind of terms were used by Bangladeshi ministers. So, we see the kind of influence the present Indian government had over Army League, and taking that for granted, Army League conducted savagery in the country. Savagery in the country. They gagged press. There was no, the freedom of the press was terrible during Hasina's period. The corruption was absolutely horrible. I myself have reported multiple corruption stories. One about the last land minister of Bangladesh, Saifuzzaman Chaudhary, who purchased nearly 800 to 1,000 assets all over the world. We discovered a secret detention cell inside Bangladesh's military intelligence agency's facility, the House of Mirrors, Ainagar, where people were kept captive for years. And India knew about all this. They were aware, but they did not do, or they did not give Hasina's administration any advice, or they did not really do anything about it, rather than supporting Hasina and giving her a free way. Also, the kind of imbalanced contracts that Bangladesh signed, imbalanced treaties that Bangladesh signed with India, with Indian counterpart. Certain things were never discussed with the people. And you will see that there is a massive agony amongst the general people of Bangladesh against India, because they have seen that it was the government in New Delhi, the Indian government in New Delhi, who empowered Sheikh Hasina to become an authoritarian ruler. If they were really friendly towards the people of Bangladesh, perhaps things would be otherwise. But they did not. So, of course, naturally, we do not want any other political party coming into the power of Bangladesh backed by a strong superpower. We don't want to do that. We want to do our things the way we please. Bangladeshi people wishes to see, not in the eyes of some other party.
And would you say that, currently in Bangladesh, the situation under the interim government or whichever elected government, democratically elected government comes to power once elections are done, do you see or are you hopeful of things being better than what they were under the Awami League rule?
We really hope that, and we would also expect that whoever comes into power does not have a foreign master. The people of Bangladesh would not like that. We do not wish to see a puppet government in Bangladesh.
Zulkarnain, coming back to the, the U.S. Jamaat outreach, some former U.S. diplomats also argue that it was over-interpreted and this was an overreach, that, diplomats talk to everyone. Why do you believe that such kind of interactions at such a crucial point when the country is going towards such a critical election, why do you think that these interactions go beyond routine engagement, and why do you think they are important to be highlighted at this point? Like you said, that there's a one of the key reasons behind it is because Bangladeshis now do not want any kind of superpowers to be, kind of imposed on them. With the US doing such an outreach to the Jamaat on January 16th, the Jamaat Islami Emir had a virtual meeting with the US Trade Representative Ambassador Jameson Greer, which was discussed a lot because there was trade, investment, even US development financing. This does not look like a symbolic outreach. Other US officials too have been reaching out to Jamaat of late. According to your reading, then, two things, like I asked, why do you think it was critical? And second, what do you think is driving, Washington's recalibration towards Bangladesh and towards Jamaat in general right now?
If you look at the situation in the US geopolitical sphere, their footprints in South Asia is has gone minimal. They do not really have a great ally in the South Asia at this moment. They have lost Pakistan. With India, they do have a good working relationship. They do not really have a country or a vassal state where they can, through whom they can conduct their business. Business in a sense that they can do their things that they normally do in a country, like things that they have done in Pakistan before, or in any other country where they want to conduct the affairs in their own way. I hope you understand what I mean. And Bangladesh is a perfect vessel for that at this moment. A country without any law and order situation is in absolute dismay. The political situation is absolutely chaotic. And what better option they have, or could they have, or what better option you need to exploit certain situation, rather, like once you have like gateways of your own people, I do not want to mention the names of people who are the gateways to Bangladesh, but there are a number of people in Bangladesh who are their gateways, and we are aware of that. People are also aware of that. Who are those people? So, when we have seen that, and when I notice that this is what is going to happen if I do not intervene, and what other diplomats mentioned, like those diplomats I know with who, like to whom you're indicating, they're also American diplomats, retired American diplomats who retired 10, 15, 20 years ago, probably. But still, they have interest on Bangladesh. Still, they have interest in Pakistan. I do not understand that. You have served in that part of the world. You have left the State Department, like the US Foreign Service, but you still have very interesting interest or some mysterious interest, I would rather say, on Bangladesh. And you will see that these diplomats, they are continuously vouching for the interim government and continuously defending their actions, and as if they are the part of that government, and or probably they are more Bangladeshi than us. So it is our land, it is our people, it is our culture, our country. Of course, I will be much more concerned about my country and my sovereignty, my safety and security than anyone else, isn't it? So, in his view, it might be wrong. He might think that okay, it should not have been done. But in my view, I can see that what kind of conversation was going on there. And of course, I will be critical of that. Of course, I will I would like to see the interest of my people first. That if I publish it, how am I going to benefit my country? And of course, people have come to know that people should have people deserve to know what is happening in the background.
So, Zulkarnain, coming back to the US strategy in Bangladesh, recent poll surveys show BNP at around 34% and the Jamaat trailing close behind at 33.6%, 33.7%. That is a very narrow margin. With the kind of rise in Jamaat's political and electoral profile that we have seen over the past year, first two questions from that. One is, how do you view their rise in the larger Bangladeshi landscape? And secondly, do you think this is the reason why Washington is now trying to woo Jamaat, because they realize that it is more about power accommodation and engaging with whoever is likely to win regardless of ideology? What is your reading of the situation?
Yeah. So historically, Jamaat Islami in Bangladesh has always been the third or fourth force. Depending on whenever the elections are conducted. They're a very old Islamic party, Islamist party. But interestingly, despite Bangladesh is a country of almost 86% people of the country are Muslim, Jamaat could never achieve more than 10% of the vote in any of the elections before. So if you go back in the past, you will not see Jamaat receiving 15% vote throughout. So, but since 2008, since as there were massive, the situation was not really favorable for any of the political parties. Let me put it that way. So nobody could really engage in political activities in that way. But what Jamaat's activists, Jamaat's young or youth fractions did was they blended themselves with other political organizations. Some even blended with Chhatra League, which we have figured out now, and they have emerged saying that we were following Hikmah, and we blended with other political parties, and then they now are surfacing, showing that they were actually active in disguise of other political parties. So uh, the surveys, again, going back to the surveys in Bangladesh are always flawed. And I'm not really a big fan of surveys because even in 2024, there was a survey where it showed that Hasina has 70% acceptance rate in Bangladesh. People are very much happy with her. Even this year, I think, or in 2025, there was a survey by the same IRI who found out that Hasina had, Dr. Yunus is liked by 70% of the people. So they cannot really come out of this 70% sphere. Like I'm referring to the IRI.
Yeah,
And on,
like
uh,
I was telling you, that is something even in the recent press conference, it was a number quoted by the former education minister,
yeah,
Mohibul Mufti, when he said that 70% of Bangladesh's population would still vote for Awami League, and it would win at least, it would have that kind of a 70% acceptance rate, is what he said, if I'm not wrong. So
yeah.
that number
So
seems to play a key role.
yes, yeah. So, as you understand that these statistics or such polls are not really in, or it doesn't really suggest who is going to form the government or who will win the election. In a country like Bangladesh, there are many things that you will have to take into consideration. The people in the villages, the women, they play a vital role in deciding who is going to form the government. So all these things, considering all these things, I do not really consider, or I do not really see that Jamaat Islami at this moment is in the forefront. But you never know. You never know. Like it's all about the people. They're out there to decide. And choosing a party like Jamaat Islami would be an option for anyone, to be very frank, because uh, as they're comparing comparative to other political parties, they're slightly weak, I would say. And any foreign power would like to see someone whose arm they can twist when required. And other political actors especially the BNP, it would be very difficult for other foreign partners to twist their arm because they have a very strict, rigid approach, nationalistic approach. So Jamaat is, of course, a better choice for countries like USA. Since we are discussing, the discussion is based on the leaked audio call. So I'm not really surprised that they have showed or expressed such support for Jamaat Islami.
And I wanted to ask you, based on that, on the economic side of it, because the audio also talks about, how the US has an economic leverage when it also comes to the garment industry. And it says that we are confident that if Jamaat comes to power, if and when it does come to power, it will never institutionalize or impose the Sharia law, because we would in return impose a tariff, 100% tariff. Do you
Yeah.
think these kind of economic pressures can realistically constrain, say, an ideological agenda? And I wanted to understand from you, what would be the economic consequences of such an alliance?
As we have already experienced that all over the world, globally, US have introduced this levies, this taxes, whatever you say it, that they're going to implement 10%, 30%, 60%, 40% based on the partner and how the partner is giving back to them. Bangladesh already is under, if I'm not wrong, 35%, if I'm not wrong, at this moment, 35 to 30% zone. So if it is one of their consideration that they will impose 100% taxes, provided that if an Islamic party comes into power and imposes Sharia, and sharing it with the journalists. I see it in a very different way, that they are trying to comfort those journalists or trying to convince them, since they are known as feminists in the community. They're trying to comfort them that look, if they know that they are fully aware that these journalists are have full knowledge on how Bangladesh and US trades are. In this aspect, this guy, this diplomat, was just trying to convince them that if they comes into power and imposes Sharia law, then overnight will impose 100% tariff on your exports. And he was also saying that 20% of our exports are going to US, and they will not
Right.
be able to take it. So I don't see it as a realistic thing rather than an method to somehow convince the journalists that we have the upper hand if a government is formed by Jamaat Islami. I would rather see it in that way.
And I mean, since we are talking about consequences and you were talking about female journalists, I wanted to ask you this question that if you talk about ideology now, the Jamaat carries a deeply controversial history, especially with its reference to its role during 1971, how it views, female rights. And yet today we also see that right before elections, the party is also kind of rebranding itself. It is speaking up on anti-corruption drives, social justice, governance, and reform, yet it has still not fielded a female candidate. I wanted to ask you that given Jamaat's rise and now that we see a kind of international legitimization, what does it mean in Bangladesh for women's rights, for secularism, and Bangladesh's democratic future in general?
I have met the Amir of Jamaat, actually. I have personally met him. He's a fantastic guy. And I had the opportunity to talk to him a few times. So the kind of politics Jamaat Islami Bangladesh practices is a bit different than other Islamist parties. So the election is ahead, and I do not really wish to make any such comment that is controversial. But the way many people see or considers that Jamaat Islami in Bangladesh would impose 100% Sharia or they will curtail female rights, I would rather be a bit optimistic about it that they there are people, of course, in Jamaat Islami, there are certain people with whom I have talks on regular basis, and I do see that they are open to modernization of their party values and understandings. So it is, of course, a concern that how certain rights will be preserved, how the secular community will operate, whether they're going to Islamize or convert certain institutions into their own way. But again, if the people decides in that way, then what else can the people can we do? It is the people's choice, and Jamaat Islami has organization, and they did work very hard, I must say. Their field level organization, their mid level organization, they have they have their own financial ecosystem from where they generate funds. They made investments into certain sectors from where funds are being generated that they use in their own party. So you will see that certain allegations against Jamaat are less compared to other political parties who have been into the power. So, yeah, it is a tough call. It is, of course, a tough call to comment that who is going to form the government or who will win in the election. But I would rather be optimistic that if a party like Jamaat wins the election and comes into the power, then they will have to do certain like
Reform.
certain reforms within themselves and understand the mindset of this new generation of Bangladeshi people.
But the fact that they have not fielded a single female candidate, and then we saw that, when Jamaat's alliance with NCP happened, the
Yeah.
student party that was born out of the 2024 uprising, a lot of female candidates chose to withdraw their nomination. If, like you say, that if they come into power, they might see a reform. Do you think what would that reform then mean for women's rights, which has been a point of contention when it comes to Jamaat? Do you see them?
Well, that is going to
If
be
you
very
talk about,
challenging. That will be
yeah, if
very
you talk,
challenging.
because I just wanted to know that when you talk about reform, a party
Yeah.
which is now poised to, like our entire discussion right now is focused on them, and there are points where where we are discussing that what happens if Jamaat actually comes into power. And for that party to not yet have fielded any female candidate, which is leading to a lot of debate, even across local and international media, as I see, how do you then understand what reform essentially means when it comes to this party?
Well, reforming means reforming for Jamaat would be to change their approach towards rights of women, of course, like the way they see. But I'm not sure whether in this segment they will be able to do any kind of reform, because if even today there will be an interview that you will see going out to Al Jazeera that I produced uh, jointly with my other colleagues. We have interviewed the Amir of Jamaat, and he categorically said that when he was asked that is there any possibility of a woman Emir of Jamaat, he said that there is no such scope for a woman to be the head of Jamaat Islami. So if that is the approach, then reform in that segment, I I feel that it is going to be extremely challenging, because I don't know how they will accommodate uh, that kind of request or that type of uh, facility for the female supporters, or for the female leaders or people who will vote for them.
I just wanted to understand from you, because you understand the ground level politics happening in Bangladesh right now. How does the BNP then view the entire rise in the Jamaat's profile? Recently, the BNP Secretary General Fakhrul Islam also said that he kind of alleged that there's a secret alliance between Jamaat and the United States, which he calls as harmful to Bangladesh's sovereignty. How do you view that? Do you see it as a very real fear of being sidelined? Do you see it as something which is more along the nationalistic lines that BNP is basing its politics on?
Look, the concern that BNP Secretary General Mr. Fakhrul raised is very valid. There is no doubt that if not if we have seen, we have evidence that US is actually vouching for Jamaat Islami, and they are trying to convince people that if there is a Jamaat government, then certain things will not happen. And they're also suggesting people, journalists, that why don't you invite these student leaders of Jamaat Islami into their shows. So we have seen that pattern. Also, they have said that Bangladesh has shifted Islamic. I'm not sure how could a US diplomat say something like this. Bangladesh is a very like our Muslim community are not that conservative, and we enjoy a very like harmonious relationship with everybody. So when it's like, it would be very wrong to claim that Bangladesh has shifted Islamic, and by seeing some like from some university elections, if a diplomat makes such comment, then I think he need to do his math right, because in Bangladesh, like in the public universities, you have to see what is the percentage of students that can make their way to the public university. Our voter is around 120 million. And in the public universities, in each public university, I doubt if the voter is more than 20 to 25,000. So in 5 or 6 public universities, the voter is 120,000. So if you take that 120,000 into consideration and compare it with the 120 million voter, then it's really absurd. What I mentioned to you earlier, that Jamaat is comparatively to the other political parties, Jamaat is, of course, a weaker force. As I mentioned to you, that in the earlier elections, despite being a Muslim majority country, Jamaat could never take on more than 10% of the vote. Uh, and this
Do you see
election,
a shift? I mean, so I'm so sorry to cut you off, but do you see a shift in the current times? Do you think that the number will now change?
the number will now definitely change, because since during Hasina's period, these last 15, 16 years, people who face that oppression people who were not able to express their democratic rights, their voting rights. Of course, they have shifted. There are people who are supportive of the Army League. There are people who are supportive for other political parties. Have shifted. Some shifted to BNP. Some have shifted to the Jamaat Islami. So you will definitely see a spike or a change in that segment. But again, coming back to that why it is dangerous for Bangladesh's sovereignty, because then you are kind of played by a superpower and trying to make your way into the power by sitting on somebody's shoulder. That is not good for any country in the world. Like, you want a party that can run your government without any kind of foreign influence, without any kind of patronization from other foreign parties.
And then how do you think, if hypothetically a government led by Jamaat does come into power, how do you think India should engage with it? Because India has long viewed Jamaat with a certain suspicion when it comes to extremism, when it comes to border security, or even the minority safety question. With a kind of now a US alliance, which is very apparent, with the kind of like we just discussed, the kind of opinion polls coming in, how would you say, or what would you say should India's approach towards Bangladesh and India Bangladesh relationships now be, given that it has been such a rocky terrain for the past 1.5 years?
India Bangladesh relationship in under any government should remain as a working relationship. It doesn't need to be too rosy, doesn't need to be too shallow. It should work as on regular basis, irrespective of who comes into the power. The relationship should be on under mutual respect basis. I respect you, you respect me back. India should not act like, hey, I am the bigger power here, and you need to follow what I ask you, or the way I would like to see you. So look, today where we are, a big responsibility of this goes to India. If they acted properly, if they acted rationally, and if their foreign policy was towards Bangladesh was not Hasina and Amalik centric, today we would see things in a much different way. We would not fall in this pattern right now, like where we are right now. So India need to rethink, rewire their foreign policy around Bangladesh, and how they see it.
Zulkarnain, one final question, and this is sort of like a concluding question based on the entire discussion that we had. I would like to know from you, that Bangladesh seems to be entering an uncharted political territory right now. There's ideology, there's geopolitics, there's also, like you said, there's a certain electoral arithmetic that is all colliding together. If I had to ask you, are we witnessing a kind of a structural shift in how foreign powers or global superpowers or global powers now engage with Islamist political movements in Bangladesh, and how Bangladesh and how Bangladesh engages back with them? And if I had to ask you now, with elections right on the head, what is one thing that ordinary Bangladeshis should be concerned about right now when it comes to Bangladesh's democratic landscape?
Ordinary Bangladeshis should be very much concerned about what they expect from their future government, or it, they have experienced a authoritarian regime for nearly 1.5 decade. For 15, 16 years, they have experienced how it feels to be oppressed. They should decide for someone who would not uh, bow down to any foreign powers, who would not run the country by someone else's instruction, and someone who respects their rights, someone who can safeguard their interests, their national interests, and of course, someone who can ensure that female rights for our women are protected and valued, and a country where people from all faith, all belief, people from any background can live freely and can rely on the state's mandate of democracy.
Thank you so much, Zulkarnain. This has been an absolute pleasure to have you on our platform.
No,
Thank you
pleasure
for
is
your time.
mine.